The spring transfer portal window has come to a close, and that means we have a pretty good idea at what these college football teams are going to be looking like in the 2025 season. So I want to go conference by conference for each of the power conferences and do a post-spring power ranking and tier list. And in today's video, we're going to start with the ACC. Before we get into the list, let's look at what the tiers are in the tier list. As you know, I go with somewhat arbitrary. This one's a little bit more grounded compared to the usual whimsical nature of the tier lists I do. The top tier, we've got ACC contention. These are the teams that will be in contention to win an ACC title this year, will be the focal point, they'll be talked about, they'll be the top tier teams. In some conferences, like the SEC and Big Ten probably, the teams in that tier are the only ones that I think are truly capable of winning the conference, but in the ACC, that's not necessarily the case. We've got dark horses, which is teams that I think could definitely throw their hat into the ring and get into that race and put themselves back on the radar at some point during the season, teams that could certainly race towards a conference title, and in some cases realistically win it. The tier below that, we've got our spoilers, teams that I don't really think even in their best case scenario are going to truly contend for an ACC title, but they could certainly play spoiler with some of the top teams, beat some of the teams tiers above them, and really shake things up in an unconventional way, and maybe in a completely outlandish scenario, put something together that's good enough to win a conference title and earn a playoff spot. Then, of course, we have the bowl hopefuls, teams where the front of their mind is not beating the top contenders or being in the ACC title race or playoff race. What at the front of their mind is making a bowl game. And if they do, it's going to be considered a success in most cases with the teams on that tier. Some cases, the fan base might not be completely connected to reality, so maybe that's not the case. But then at the bottom tier, we have rebuilding. It's a nice way to say the team is not going to be very competitive this season. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I did say it's going to be a power ranking and a tier list, so we are going to be ranking all of these teams 1 through 17 alongside putting them in the tier list. So we're going to start with the teams that fall in the rebuilding tier, which is going to be at number 17, Stanford, and at number 16, Cal. And there's just not a lot to say about these teams that hasn't already been said. Both experienced just some extreme scenarios this offseason, and we'll start by talking about Stanford because they're at the bottom here with the Cardinal firing Troy Taylor in the spring, late into the offseason. Never ideal. Now, they did do a decent job of trying to recoup things. They bring in Frank Reich, who's going to serve in an interim capacity basically this season, but so much talent went out the door that I don't think Stanford's going to have anything significant happen to them this season. It's a team that went 3-9 last year, had some slight flashes of maybe some promise, but really it's largely a much worse team than it was last season. That maybe slightly better coach, Frank Reich's a decent coach. Maybe he can get good quarterback play out of some of the guys they have, like Dylan Rizek. But I really don't think it's going to be a good year for them. And then one spot above them, we've got the Cal Golden Bears. They experienced a spring transfer portal exodus unlike any we've really seen recently. Basically, their entire offense, and I'm not even kidding, running backs 1 through 4, wide receivers 1 through 3, their quarterback, but so many players on this offense transferred out. Jack Endries, their great tight end, and it left Cal in a really rough spot. They were much higher on this list headed into the spring transfer portal window, and they've been knocked down to 16 because there's just a lot that happened that is just not to like for Cal. And they lost Peter Sermon, their offensive coordinator, probably had something to do with it. There's also like a booster coup going on. So those two teams are in the rebuilding tier. The next tier is going to be the bowl hopefuls, and we'll start with a team that is at number 15, the lowest of these three, which is going to be Wake Forest. With the Demon Deacons, they have a new head coach this season in Jake Dickert. They're a team that there is some positivity and things to like. They went ahead and did a lot through the transfer portal. I like some of the hires he made. Rob Ezel, I may be mispronouncing his name, but he was the offensive coordinator at South Alabama last season. Really was effective for their offense, and so Dickert brings him in for the staff for Wake Forest. I like that. Robbie Ashford's going to be their quarterback, and I do think he looks solid in that start he had for South Carolina last season. So Ashford, a little bit of a different quarterback than he previously was when we saw him at Auburn, and I think Wake Forest could be a decent team overall. And so that takes us to the next team, which is going to be Boston College at number 14, and the Eagles are a team that I think people like because there was a pretty well-covered rise from them last season. People talked about, how much improvement they had. They had a really nice start at the season. They were in the top 25 at one point, but this offseason, there was a lot of churn that hit them. They only returned 2 starting offensive linemen from what was really a strength for them last season. They're going to be thrusting a young quarterback into a starting role, whether it be Grayson James, or a Dylan Lonergan. Both are talented talented players that could maybe make something happen, but there's a lot of moving parts around them, and the defense does not return a lot of production from last season. So when I'm looking at the pecking order in the ACC, Boston College doesn't stand out as a team that's going to rise that high, and it doesn't seem like they're going to buck that trend of mediocrity they've had. At number 13, we've got the Virginia Cavaliers, another bowl hopeful in here, and Virginia is a team that I actually really like. They were at the highest of the bowl hopefuls tier. I almost thought about putting them in the spoilers category, but I really don't think they rise that high. Basically, Tony Elliott hasn't made a bowl game in 3 years of Virginia, but there's been improvement each season, and this year they went really aggressive in the portal and really churned a lot of this roster, but I like the continuity they still have. He still has the same offensive and defensive coordinators that he started with at Virginia, and that's something that I think I really like to see with a team, and so he's trusting his process, and they are really going at it, and this year they kind of circled as a year, let's go all in, let's get whoever we can out of the portal that we think is going to fit in our system, and it could blow up in their face, but it could result in a very pleasantly surprising season for Virginia, and I think they could end. I think it's a 4-year bowl drought for them right now. So let's go ahead and turn up the heat a little bit and get to the spoilers tier, teams that I think could potentially play spoiler in the ACC, and we've got 3 teams in here, starting with number 12 at Syracuse, and I know some people are really going to dislike this spot for Syracuse because people love Fran Brown, and you should. I've talked to the man before. He's extremely nice. He's a great guy and a great coach as well, and he showed that last season with the quick flipping of Syracuse to a 10-win team, but the key thing to remember is Syracuse had a very manageable schedule last season. This season, it gets significantly tougher. They have the toughest schedule in the ACC because of some of the non-conference opponents they have, like Tennessee and Notre Dame. It just gets pretty rough for these guys. And if you look at the roster and what happened to this team, they had some really rough portal entries, like Trevor Pena pretty late. Zeed Haynes was another guy. Some things that happened to Syracuse football recently that were slightly out of their control, but they also graduated a lot of guys. They were a pretty senior-heavy team that had a lot of success last season. And so those are a couple of factors. I like the fact that they added Steve Angeli. I still think they'll be a solid competitive team. I'm not saying they're going to go 3-9 or anything. I know 12 seems low, but when there's 17 teams in a conference, 12 still means you're above 5 teams, which is pretty much like in the middle of a conference if it was a conventional size. So Syracuse is a team that I still think will be good, and I still think will win games, but how many will they win with a really tough schedule? I don't know, and I'd be lying if I said that Syracuse wasn't low because of that schedule. Because the schedule is there, because their record might be a little worse, I feel comfortable putting them below the 2 other teams in this tier. And we'll talk about the other ones. We got Duke at number 11, another team that won a lot of games last season. Duke went 9-4, had a great first year under Manny Diaz, but I really think right now their offensive staff isn't up to the caliber it needs to be, and I think that's something they might find out this year. I love the addition of Darian Mensah. Maybe that could help cover some of those things up, but their offense was truly inefficient last season. Their defense definitely showed some positive signs. I think they did a decent job at gelling things there, but Duke's another team that had an exceptionally easy schedule. That gets a little bit more difficult this season. And then, of course, there's NC State at the 10 spot in the spoilers tier. The Wolfpack were a team that struggled throughout last season, but I really like the fact that a lot of young players were able to get solid starting experience for NC State this last season, and I think they can ride that this season and use that added experience. I also like some of the new hires that he made, that Dave Doran, I should say, the head coach for NC State, made on the staff, and I like the fact that CJ Bailey's going to be playing for the offensive coordinator that was his quarterback coach last season and was the guy who recruited him out of high school. And I think Bailey is also a budding star in the ACC. So NC State, I think, is going to have some improvement from last season's disastrous year. So let's get to the second highest tier, which is going to be dark horses in the ACC, teams that I think could get into that ACC title picture. At number 9, we have Florida State. The Seminoles are an extremely tough team to place, but I'd be lying if I said they weren't capable of getting back into the ACC title conversation this year. We've seen it happen under Mike Norvell, and they went really portal heavy again to try and offset some of the things that went wrong last season. But the key thing to note is that they were able to retain some of the guys they went after last year that maybe struggled for them but are still young and promising. And even though it was a disastrous season for Florida State, there was still some growth to be had late in the year. And the most important part, they have 2 new coordinators, Gus Malzahn and Tony White. At the very least, the coaching is going to improve, and maybe they tweak their portal evaluation from how badly things turned out last season to this year. So I think there's signs of improvement for Florida State, but again, a really hard team to predict. You look at the volatility from each of the last 2 seasons for them, who knows what's going to happen this year. I think it's safe to put them somewhere in the middle and say, yeah, maybe they could get into the ACC title picture if something great happens. We've got Pitt at number 8. Pitt is a team that I really like, even though though they ended last season on a 6-game losing streak, when Eli Holstein was healthy, this offense was rolling at a pretty high level, and Pitt was doing really solid. And I also just like a lot of the things that they did during the offseason to help shore up the things that were going well. Randy Bates is obviously a great defensive coordinator. He's going to keep doing his thing for Pitt as well, and it's a very consistent program and consistent team. Even though they had a stinker a couple of years ago, I think the program has stabilized somewhat, so I'm comfortable putting them at number 8. At number 7, we have Virginia Tech. The Hokies burned me really bad last season. I think I had them at like number 4 or something like that, and they ended up finishing, I believe, below 500 after a bowl loss. Not a great year for the Hokies, but this season they come in, they've got 2 new coordinators on offense and defense, and they also went very portal heavy. But this time around, I think they made some of the right moves through the portal. They also have experience at quarterback in Kyron Drones, who's back. And so I look at these things that Virginia Tech did, and I actually think that a lot of them are pretty promising. And I know I got burned on them last season, but that's why I'm being a little bit more conservative, I think, with their rating here, putting them down at number 7. They just have a lot to build off of from some good things that were happening despite the rough season last year. And then at number 6, we have North Carolina. It's Bill Belichick's first year at North Carolina, and I think he's instantly going to flip the defense into a net positive, which is going to do huge things because offensively, North Carolina looks pretty stout. They're going to bring in Gio Lopez, who's going to be their guy. I think he could instantly be a star in the ACC. Freddie Kitchens is his offensive coordinator, and he was a guy from the previous regime at North Carolina, and I think that could do a lot for the Tar Heels in supporting the North Carolina culture. And I think him embracing the existing culture while also bringing his own flair is going to really help out North Carolina in the long run. And I think the Tar Heels are set for a very pleasantly surprising year this year, and they have a super easy schedule that I think they could ride into potentially ACC title contention if things break the right way for them. And so that gets us to the top tier, which is ACC contention. And we've got 5 teams in this tier, which seems like quite a lot, but I just think there's a lot of teams that are capable of being in this conversation this season in the ACC. So we'll start with the team that is in my 5 spot, which is the team that won the most ACC games during the regular season last year, and that's SMU. SMU had a fantastic season. The thing that happened to them this offseason is a lot of those great players from that fantastic team went out the door because they had graduated or they're off to the NFL. And so SMU had to do a lot to attempt to replace those guys this offseason. They went, I think, a little bit more portal heavy than they would have liked to, but at the end of the day, you've got to trust Rhett Lashley and the staff, what they were able to do. You love the continuity they have at quarterback with Kevin Jennings coming back, but we'll just see what happens with this team. It's kind of a wait and see. I do think they'll still be solid, but a team that definitely could regress a little bit, and that's, I think, reflected by their ranking at 5, but maybe they're back in the mix again. They're a team that is acquiring talent at a pretty high level right now and operating at a high level as a program overall. At the number 4 spot, we've got the Miami Hurricanes. Miami is the most talented team in the ACC right now. That is 100% a fact if you go based off of the previous recruiting classes over the last 4 seasons, and yet the Hurricanes have continuously struggled late in the season. They are now 4-8 in the month of November under Mario Cristobal, and for that reason, despite the fact that they're extremely talented, they have some extremely good players in this roster, and they once again had an offseason where they stacked a bunch of talent and they have a really good team. I look at this team and I get weary, and I feel like I cannot trust them late in the season to put together a complete year. So until further notice, I have Miami at number 4, and maybe they prove me wrong this season, but it's been tough trusting Miami recently because of those late season collapses that they've had, and it's something that Cristobal had a reputation for in his time at Oregon as well. So you wonder if that's a chronic issue, maybe with the staff, maybe with Cristobal. It's starting to get to that point with Miami, I think. At number 3, I've got Louisville. The Cardinals have been a team that has leaned very heavily on the transfer portal under Jeff Brom, and typically that would be something that makes me weary of being high on a team, but Louisville's portal evaluation is among the best in the entire country. Their hit rate through the portal is so impressive. They bring back Isaac Brown. They have Miller Moss coming in at quarterback. I really love this staff that they've been able to keep mostly together at Louisville, and so there's just a lot of continuity, a lot of good things happening. It's a team you can really trust to be in that picture, in that conversation of ACC title talk. Their one thing has been they haven't been able to really finish a season yet either. They did make the ACC title game a couple of years ago, which is something Miami can't say. For that reason, I have a little bit more confidence in them. They'll be in the conversation and in the picture again. They've just got to get through there. I look at Louisville. They're a team that beat Clemson on the road last season. That's the team to beat in the ACC. They host them this year, so I do love Louisville a lot. But there's a team I like a little bit more than that, and that is the number 2 team in my power rankings, which is Georgia Tech, who is also in the top tier. Georgia Tech is a team that I have just gotten obsessed with this offseason, and it starts with me loving a team that plays with a chip on their shoulder like this team does under Brent Key. They absolutely have an edge to them. We saw it in the Georgia game, and it's a team I think less people are talking about because they just lost that Georgia game. If they would have won that, the buzz for these guys would be, and pun intended on buzz, would be at an all-time high. You look at what they did. Haynes King is back at quarterback. Jamal Haynes is back at running back. I think they may have upgraded at wide receiver with Eric Rivers. They bring back a guy like Kyle Eford, who went viral last season for his appearance as a linebacker and really stacked the linebacker class again. I am loving a lot of things I'm seeing. Tyler Stantucci ended up going to the NFL, their defensive coordinator, and they bring in Blake Gideon. He's a rising name in the sport, a guy I think that could help them out defensively. That would be my one concern with them, but I've just seen too much tangible success and improvement with Georgia Tech to ignore it any longer. I like the Yellow Jackets this season, and I think they could do something pretty special, which takes me to number 1, which is the Clemson Tigers. And I was just so glowing about Georgia Tech that you think, how could any team be above them? And Clemson just transcends everything, because under Dabo Swinney, it does not matter if they are having a down year and not meeting their expectations. They just win this conference, it feels like, every year. They won it last season, despite what was considered to be a down year. They lost that game to Louisville, which was considered to be ugly, but they still made a backdoor push. They end up winning the ACC, and here they are again. They are the highest team in returning production in the entire country. They're in a position to once again make a run to the ACC title and be heavily favored in the ACC title game. And if they don't win the ACC this year, it'll be a big shocker, because they bring back everything. Everyone is back for this team this season, and Clemson should factor into this race again. I don't know if they'll be a national title contender, but they'll definitely be the favorites to win the ACC. So there you have it, my complete updated ACC tier list for post-spring and my ACC power rankings. These things are not likely to change a whole lot before the season starts. When I crunch the power ranking numbers, for example, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Miami were like all the same exact rating, and then from there it's just a little bit more subjectivity to determine the order, so perhaps that flips as the offseason continues on, but generally speaking, this will not change much. This is going to be my thoughts headed into the season. And I'm just so stoked for the season to start, because I think this conference is going to be pretty entertaining. Some bizarre storylines near the bottom of the conference, some fun storylines near the top, and Bill Belichick joining this conference. I mean, it's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch. But I know you guys probably have some opinions about this conference, the pecking order, how you think things will pan out. So let me know down in the comments what you think about the power ranking, about the tier list, and about all of my thoughts on the ACC. That's all I have for you guys in this video. Comment down below which conference I should do next. I've got the Big 12, Big 10, and SEC still to do, and we'll probably tackle one of those next. But like I said, that's all I have, and I will see you guys later this week.